Thank you so much, Clara and Ulrika, for your amazing research and investigation. I have a question to Clara first. So in one of the conversations you mentioned that you had access to Danish National Archive only on the fact that you were born in Greenland. So certain information, very sensitive information, was available for you just for the fact that you were born there. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit about the openness of this archive for wider researchers and yeah, and then about your, in a way, method of research and this investigative approach?
Yeah, so of course, anyone who's ever been to an archive or knows something about it, I think it's also very up in the times to investigate or approach a project in this sense, but we'll know that there's definitely several different mechanisms put in order to preserve an archive, and most of them make a lot of sense. But what I found was just the way that we're phrasing things when we talk about these archives or how they were portrayed in a Danish context was like you refer to something as a secret archive, but you're not disclosing, like, why is it secret? You know, like, are you just not putting in, I'm sorry, but the work in order to get there, to actually properly investigate or go beyond these mechanisms? And so for the Danish archive, the Danish National Archive specifically, it's, of course, through your CPR number that you can get in. So if you have like a Danish medical insurance and everything, you can get in. Of course, as an international researcher, you also can, but then it's just inherently more difficult. And so with any archive, it's just how they're making it increasingly more difficult. Also with the Greenlandic one, that I had to sign NDAs for certain things, that you had to be surveilled when you approach different subjects, especially with this one. But then also with the Greenlandic archive, that there was put a ban on it when I signed the NDA, for like that you couldn't get access unless you were a researcher within these next 75 years, which means that the women who it happened to can't access their own files or their own documentations about their own story. Yeah, I hope that was
incredible. Yeah. Question to Ulrika. Ulrika was the co-curator of the first edition of the new subject in Stockholm. Back then she was director of Konsthalsia. It's an artist-run space in Stockholm, and it was the beginning of the project. And Ulrika contributed generously towards the content of the exhibition with the work of Anders Suna, about whom she talked in her presentation, but also Tore Hellas, who is now in view in the exhibition in Kindle. But the also very valuable input of Ulrika was the very compelling timeline she composed based on the legislative system of Sweden and wider Scandinavia. And one of the about approach to state approach to body and different processes of control around it, and stigmatization, utilization. And one of the section was about development of eugenic movement in Stockholm. So do you see now, as a person who is really analytically and critically looking at the state policy in Sweden, do you see any traces of eugenic now in different spheres of life?
I think to a certain extent that those traces are always going to be there, because it's in this sort of understandings of different people that lives underneath racism and underneath these ideas about that is linked often to nationalism as well. So this idea that certain people are less than others is of course the roots within eugenics, right? That some if you're tall and blonde and so-called the Nordic race, that is like top of the hierarchy and everything else. So those ideas are living on in very clear ways. So I mean, this is very personal statement. So the government that we have right now, we also is supported by the Swedish Democrats, which is a party that, you know, not that long ago was a party that saw themselves as neo-Nazis. So of course these ideas of racial difference lives on. If you have one of the largest parties in the country having that history that they self, you know, own up to, but somehow also says that that's left behind, that they have a rethink on these things. But not so long ago, you could also read in their, you know, political statements that the basis, the sort of core value or the basis in a white Swede and someone like myself we could never really understand each other's across these racial lines. And those ideas could directly be linked back to the eugenics movement. So I think that as long as we have, you know, racism, as long as we have these ongoing groups that are signing up to these old ideas, we also have these links that but also in other ways that is not so apparent. So, you know, like if you go in a national museum or anywhere, many of those iconic works that are painted by famous people, like in Sweden, that Carl Larsson or so, that, you know, showcases Swedishness in its essence, right? These people were also very much connected to these ideas about the Swedish race or the blonde life, or the, you know, all these ideas that comes out of that way of thinking. So a lot of our national heritage also somehow reflects this. And there's this amazing artist that I think you also know, Minna. Is it Minna Henriksson? Yeah.
Minna Henriksson, yes, in Sweden.
Who made
in
mapping.
In Finland.
She did this amazing mapping around the Nordics, especially Finland and Sweden, where these, you know, looking at the Race Institute and other similar places and so-called science and research, and how those links back to the art world in many ways. So yeah, I think everything lingers. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe you have some questions towards each other. Maybe you want to ask any questions?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what do you think, like in regards to nationalism and the idea of the Dane, do you see those traces also in what happened in Greenland, in of course a colonial setting? But yeah, how do you feel like those ideas are there in presence?
It's interesting because we also, I mean, we had a chance to speak a little bit together before, introduced as like the Scandinavian representation. And I think it's interesting both for Sweden and Denmark also, because I was talking to you about how I found some files from Sweden, like have we done, like carried out similar procedures. And of course, like especially from Denmark is like all that I can speak in behalf, or I can't speak behalf of Denmark, but with the project, my impression is that of course there is like a great difficulty right now with Greenland and Denmark, like Greenland moving up geopolitically, strategically, and also separating from Denmark, wanting to separate from Denmark, wanting that to be a very clear decision. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit the time over card. No, but there is a great wish to separate, and also, as you finished your beautiful presentation, like all I want is an apology. That is literally all the women want. Nothing is going to financially compensate for the hurt of this campaign. Nothing is going to give them the children that they could never have. All they want is for the Danish state to recognize what happened to them and that it was deliberate. Yeah, if that's an answer.
Yeah. You also mentioned that you found some files that was also linked to Sweden in your research.
Yeah, and I think this is maybe something that we should, you can also talk, maybe we should look into it, but I think you can also maybe elaborate if there is anything else you explained to me, because I saw a file which was called, similar to the Greenland project, or not the project, right, but the IUD campaign carried out in Greenland, that there was something called the Sweden-Sri Lanka pilot project, which I found in the Rockefeller archive. And it's still to be, I think, investigated fully, the roots of also Scandinavia and their culpability in broadening out campaigns such as this. But I don't know if there's anything you can talk into, like of the history. You said you didn't hear about it.
No, I haven't heard about that Sri Lanka project. I heard about other things happening in Sri Lanka, but that has more to do with, so, how do you say it? Like spreading a good image of Sweden abroad. So I guess I should look into this with you. That would be fantastic. Yeah.
We have one more question that we can take from the audience, and the rest we will leave for the Q&A in the end. Okay, we have a question here.
Sorry. I just saw on the final slide of your presentation, Clara, there was a sticker that said Disney, and I was sort of interested by that, but also a question of you showed different files, different digital files of the projects that went on around the world. Those were organized by the Population Council, as I understand it. Did those go on post 1976, or how long did those go on, and to what extent do you know about kind of the extent to which this took place within sort of the countries that were colonized by those European countries, or did those take place sort of domestically within those countries, or I just wondered if you could talk to that.
It's a complex, good question. I have many answers, but in this sense, I can only speak into how long it lasted for in the Danish and Greenlandic regime, where they're still finding cases up until like 2013. So there's still been procedures in order, mechanisms. You can also, when we talk about if it was the Population Council broadening it out, there's still research to be done for every specific country, I'm sure. But what they did through the organizations of International Planned Parenthood was that they had advised every single country to do it through their organs, or like their systems and their institutions, in order to make sure that they could not be held accountable in the end, so that there was like a different trace leading back to like the state. So it would be their individual states of every place. With Disney, there's also, you'll see on the archive upstairs, it's also on YouTube, but Disney was just part of what I would call like showing this propaganda. There's a specific video funded by the Population Council with Donald Duck explaining why we are introducing family planning. So it's like a thing where Donald Duck, of course, like pulls down the map and shows the entire world, and then that there's a scale of imbalance because now in the colonies they've gained access to Western medication, so the balance between who lives and who dies is off, and therefore we need to implement campaigns such as the IUD campaign. So it was always like a strategic tool to lower the birth rate. As we see also in Greenland, simply because the birth rate went up. So it was simply a tool, the IUD campaign. Yeah, I hope that was an answer.
So it was simply about money then?
Yeah, through different mechanisms. Also in the Danish state tried or forcefully moved. There were 17 villages around the East Coast, and they tried to centralize every production around the capital in Nuuk. So everything was always about money. Yeah.
Thank you so much, both of you. Thank you for your questions. And we're moving towards next presentations. And yeah, we will give
Thank
an
you.
applause to our speakers.